In the cold silence of a moonless night, King Aldred of Thorneveld dreamed of peace, while his brother dreamed of power. For years, Prince Garrick had smiled at court feasts, bowed in councils, and whispered loyalty. Yet, envy festered behind those smiles.
The people adored Aldred, calling him the Lionheart, while Garrick was merely the shadow behind the throne.
One night, as rain lashed the castle walls, Garrick entered the royal chamber. The king lay unguarded, trusting the brother who had shared his childhood. With trembling hands, Garrick drew a dagger engraved with the royal crest and plunged it into Aldred's heart. The king's eyes opened confusion, not anger, in them, before life slipped away. When dawn came, Garrick announced the king's tragic death in sleep, but blood leaves trails, and soon whispers grew. The court jester, who saw Garrick's blood-stained cloak, vanished mysteriously. The queen hung herself in grief. Garrick was crowned, but no song celebrated him. The people called him the King of Midnight Murder.
Legends say every night, Garrick awoke screaming, seeing Aldred's eyes in the dark, asking the same question. Why, brother?
Queen Isolde ruled beside her son, young King Marcellus, after her husband's death. But power, once tasted, is never easily surrendered. The boy grew strong, wise, and beloved, too beloved for Isolde's liking. Soon, her influence faded. Counselors sought the king's word, not hers. In the grand feasts of Vildoria, Isolde smiled, a mother's warmth hiding a serpent's venom. She summoned the royal alchemist, commanding a draught for the king's health. The liquid shimmered golden sweet-smelling, laced with death. That night, as the court dined, she lifted her goblet and watched her son drink. His laughter faded. His skin turned pale. He fell to the floor, gasping for breath, calling, "Mother!" But she only whispered, "For the crown." The kingdom mourned, and Isolde wept in public tears that fooled none. Servants swore the queen visited the crypt nightly, speaking to the stone coffin. One morning, she was found lifeless beside it, her lips stained with the same poison she'd once given him. They buried her beside her son, but the priests say every night, the crypt echoes with a mother's cry. "My crown for your forgiveness!" Sir Roderick of Valamore was once the most loyal knight of King Edron Escor. A hero, a protector, a legend. But loyalty's a fragile thing when gold glitters brighter than honor. When the rival kingdom of Arvenia offered Roderick a chest of jewels and a castle of his own, his oaths began to crumble. He was tasked with a deed darker than treason to deliver his king into enemy hands. During a campaign near the border, Roderick whispered false safety into the king's ear, leading him into a gorge free of danger. But hidden among the rocks waited Arvenian archers. The ambush was swift and merciless. Arrows blackened the sky. Edrin fell from his horse, pierced through his armor. Roderick watched, unmoving, as the man who once called him brother gasped his last. He received his promised gold, but when he opened the chest, the jewels had turned to ashes. The castle he was promised was burned to ruins. Arvenia had no need for a traitor. They found Roderick hanging from a tree by his own sword belt, a note pinned to his armor. "Those who sell kings, sell their souls first."
The court of Dornahelm glittered with silk and steel. Nobles smiling by day, plotting by candlelight.
Prince Lorien had waited years to inherit the throne from his frail father, but the council chose his cousin, Prince Merrick, instead. A single decision ignited a storm of vengeance. During Merrick's coronation, as the choirs sang and bells rang, Lorien approached with a ceremonial dagger, the royal gift of brotherhood. He knelt, offered it, as tradition demanded, and whispered, "For the crown." Before anyone could react, he drove the blade upward, straight through Merrick's heart. The choir's song turned to screams. Lorien stood, blood spattering his royal robes, and proclaimed himself king. None dared challenge him. Fear silenced courage. He ruled with terror, his throne forever stained. Yet on every anniversary of the coronation, he ordered the same dagger placed beside him, to remind all of how easily a crown could change hands. They say Lorien died in his sleep years later, found with that same dagger through his chest. No one entered his chamber that night. Only a whisper remained. The crown remembers. The great hall of Dunbarth was filled with laughter, wine, and deceit.
Lord Halric, known for his cunning, invited every noble of the realm to a feast celebrating peace after war.
Yet, hidden beneath that golden promise was vengeance older than memory. As the torches flickered, servants carried in roasted swans, spiced wine, and poisoned bread. The lords drank to brotherhood, and one by one, their laughter choked into silence. The queen's goblet fell, shattering. The duke's face turned ashen. Within moments, the feast became a grave. Halric stood from his seat, his eyes cold.
Now the debt of my father's blood is paid, he declared, watching the nobles collapse around him.
By dawn, over 50 corpses lay across the tables. The feast of peace, now a banquet of death. But vengeance breeds vengeance. Halric Essone's steward, whose son died that night, slipped a blade beneath his ribs before sunrise. As Halric's lifeblood stained the table, the steward whispered, "A debt repaid again!" No feast was ever held in Dunbarth again. The hall stands silent, the smell of burnt wine still lingering. Travelers say that on stormy nights, ghostly laughter echoes within the last toast of the dead. They were brothers, not by blood, but by battle. King Rohan and Sir Cedric had fought side by side in countless wars, their bond forged in fire and victory. Cedric had sworn to protect his king until death, but he never thought he'd be the one to bring it. When Rowan married the Duchess of Elmer, jealousy began to whisper. Cedric had loved her in silence for years, and the thought of her in the king's arms burned through him like acid. The queen, cunning and ambitious, saw his pain and turned it into a weapon. She told Cedric that Rowan planned to banish him, calling him a knight grown too powerful. Enraged, Cedric confronted the king. Words turned to shouts, shouts to steel. The clash of swords echoed in the empty hall until Rohan fell. Blood pooling beneath the throne they once dreamed of protecting together. Realizing the truth, that the queen had deceived him, Cedric placed the blade to his own heart, but before dying, he whispered, "We won every war, except the one inside me." The queen ruled briefly after, but her reign ended in madness. Some say she still roams the halls, hearing the ghostly clash of two brothers' blades. Prince Alaric of Dorne was a man impatient with fate. The crown was his by right, but his father, King Edron, the Just, clung to life and power longer than his son's greed could bear. Whispers of rebellion stirred across the land, and Alaric saw opportunity. He began to court the loyalty of the king's guard, feeding them silver and lies. One winter's night, he entered the royal chamber under the pretense of concern. The old king smiled weakly, saying, "One day, my son, the crown will be yours." But Alaric could not wait for one day. He placed a pillow gently upon his father's face and pressed. The king's frail hands clawed at his son's wrists, then fell still. Alaric wept, not from sorrow, but relief. He told the court the king had died peacefully in sleep.
The coronation followed swiftly.
Yet soon after, the royal crown began to feel heavier than gold. Each night, Alaric heard his father's muffled gasps in the dark. On the first anniversary of his coronation, the guards found him lifeless on the throne, the pillow that once killed his father now covering his face. The crown had claimed its due.
Brother Ivor was no ordinary monk.
Beneath his calm prayers hid a brilliant, dangerous mind. He was the keeper of the royal chronicles, scrolls that held the kingdom's blood-soaked truths. Wars rewritten as victories, betrayals buried under ink. When the rival empire of Calderon offered him gold and freedom for those secrets, temptation became his god.
Ivor agreed.
Late one night, he crept into the monastery's vaults, rolled the forbidden parchments, and fled through the storm.
Within weeks, Calderon invaded.
Armed with knowledge that shattered the kingdom's defenses, ambush routes, alliances, weaknesses, all betrayed by one man's greed. Castles fell, cities burned. The king was captured, forced to kneel before the very scrolls that once glorified his rule. Ivor got his gold, but soon found no peace. The emperor who bought him grew suspicious and ordered his tongue cut out. so he could betray no more. They say his ghost still haunts the ruins of the monastery, clutching invisible scrolls, whispering names of the damned. The kingdom was never rebuilt. Its last chronicle ends with 7 words, and truth was the sharpest dagger of all. It was meant to be the grandest union of 2 kingdoms, Prince Theon of Ralworth marrying Princess Morena of Eston. The halls gleamed with gold, the air thick with perfume and promise. But behind the smiles and songs, hatred brewed. Theon's father had executed Morena's brother years before, and though peace was declared, vengeance had never slept. On the night of the wedding feast, Morena raised a golden goblet, her hand trembling, not from fear, but anticipation. As the crowd toasted, musicians struck a joyful tune. Then, chaos. The first scream came from the Duke, clutching his throat.
The second from the bishop, eyes bleeding.
The wine had been poisoned, all except Morena's. The prince, gasping for air, fell into her arms, whispering, "Why?" She smiled through tears and replied, "For my brother." By dawn, over 100 nobles lay dead. Morena vanished that night, never seen again. Some say she became a nun. Others, a witch, living in exile. Every year Ralworth's royal bells toll at midnight, not for celebration, but in remembrance of the wedding that drowned a dynasty in red wine and regret. The feast of love became the banquet of death. The kingdom of Varathia had ruled for a millennium, its bloodline unbroken, its power absolute. But every dynasty ends, not with war, but with a whisper. King Helmar trusted his counselor, Lord Severin, above all men. Severin had guided 3 generations of rulers, but as age weakened the king, Severin's ambition grew like rot beneath gold.
He promised the rival kingdom of Duran a peaceful surrender in exchange for the throne once Helmar died.
To ensure his reward, Severin did not wait for nature. One evening, he poured a few drops of blackroot poison into the king's chalice during prayer. The old monarch died quietly, still clutching the goblet of betrayal. When the truth surfaced, the people rose in fury. The palace was stormed, the throne burned, and Severin dragged through the streets, crown shards pressed into his flesh. The Varathian bloodline ended that day not by enemy sword, but by trusted hands. Centuries later, bards still sing the last words carved into the palace gate before it fell. Empires fall not from war, but from within. Queen Eleonora Varen was famed for her beauty, and feared for her silence. Behind her, calm gaze burned a storm of desire and deceit. Her husband, King Theobald, was cruel, cold, and twice her age. In secret, she found comfort in Sir the commander of the royal guard, a man whose loyalty wavered between love and ambition. One night, Eleonora whispered to him, "If the crown were yours, would you still kneel to me?" The question was poison sweeter than wine. Within a week, the king fell mysteriously ill. The royal healer found nothing natural in his death. His heart had stopped without reason. His lips darkened with unseen venom. When the mourning ended, the queen crowned her protector as king. "But guilt is a sharper blade than any sword." Rumors spread like wildfire. Servants claimed they saw the ghost of Theobald walking the battlements at night, his crown glowing with pale fire. One morning, Alarion was found dead beside the throne, his hand frozen around an invisible dagger. Eleonora wept publicly, but never spoke again. She ruled alone until her death, wearing a veil to hide her face. They say beneath it, her lips still whispered, "My love killed my crown." Father Merrick of Ardenshire was known as the king's confessor. Every sin, every fear, every whisper of doubt, the king told him all. Yet, behind the priest's humble robes lay a zealot's fire. He believed the king Escreed had damned the kingdom and that only holy blood could cleanse it. The plan was simple and divine in his eyes. During a royal sermon, before the gathered court, Merrick would deliver the word of God. The king sat proudly, unaware that salvation and death now shared the same altar.
As Merrick raised the chalice, he spoke. "This is the cup of redemption." Then, with one swift motion,
He drew a hidden dagger from beneath his robes and plunged it into the king's heart. Gasps filled the hall as the monarch fell, crimson staining the marble floor. The priest raised his hands, shouting, "The Lord reclaims his kingdom." Before guards cut him down where he stood, his dying words were a curse. "Your crown will turn to ash." Within months, plague swept through the capital, devouring nobles and peasants alike.
No heir ever sat upon that throne again.
The cathedral still stands, but no one dares drink from its chalice. It was supposed to be a day of triumph. After years of civil war, Prince Corvin finally seized the throne. Bells rang, banners waved, peace seemed within reach.
But beneath the golden garlands, treachery stirred.
Corvin's general, Lord Eamon, had fought by his side through every battle, yet he believed the crown should reward him more than gratitude. When Corvin refused his demand for half the treasury, Eamon vowed to take everything, including his life. During the coronation feast, as Corvin lifted his goblet to toast his people, Eamon smiled across the table. The wine had been tampered with, mixed with viper's kiss, a poison without taste or scent. Moments later, the king collapsed, blood spilling from his lips. Panic erupted. Eamon rose to restore order, declaring himself protector of the realm. But before he could claim the throne, a serving girl, the king's loyal spy, stabbed him through the spine with his own dagger.
By morning, the hall was a field of corpses.
The crown lay on the blood-soaked table, unclaimed. They say the throne of Corvin was cursed ever after. No king wore the crown for more than a year before dying mysteriously. A kingdom born in blood, ruled by ghosts. Every king fears betrayal, but none expect it from the man who writes their laws. Chancellor Armand had served King Varel for decades, drafting treaties, raising armies, and managing the crown's secrets. But power, once tasted, devours the soul. When famine struck, and the people starved, Armand whispered to the nobles that the king had hidden gold while his subjects suffered. The court turned restless. Rebellion flared like wildfire. In a single night, Armand's men stormed the palace, capturing Varel alive. The king pleaded for mercy, still believing his advisor would protect him. Armand only smiled and said, "I am protecting you from the burden of rule." At dawn, the king was executed before the city gates. Armand declared himself regent, then king. His rule lasted precisely 1 year. One morning, his own scribe found him slumped over his desk, strangled by the golden chain of office, the very symbol he'd stolen. No intruder was ever found. On the parchment before him, the ink had smeared into words written by a dying hand. The throne keeps no friends. In the war-torn realm of Terith, loyalty was bought, not earned. Captain Dren, a soldier hardened by years of battle, had once sworn an oath to King Orion, an oath sealed in blood. But hunger and hopelessness make even the strongest man falter. When the enemy commander offered him 30 silver coins, the price of betrayal, Dren hesitated only once. He agreed to open the city gates at midnight, ensuring the king's capture. As the clock struck 12, the gates creaked open. Enemy forces flooded in, slaughtering guards and priests alike. Dren watched from the shadows as King Orion was dragged from his throne, beaten, and executed under the very banner of his own crown. The next morning, Dren approached the enemy camp to claim his payment. The commander smiled, tossed him the bag of silver, and ordered his archers to fire. They buried Dren in an unmarked grave, the coins scattered over his corpse. Years later, peasants claimed to hear clinking metal at night, as if the dead man still searched for his blood money. A single phrase was carved on his abandoned sword: "Silver weighs more than honor, until death." In the marble halls of Valdaran, Emperor Cassian ruled with a golden fist. He had conquered kingdoms, crushed rebellions, and silenced anyone who dared to oppose him. But empires rot from within, and his poison came not from an enemy, but from his own cupbearer. Lyra, the cupbearer, had served him since childhood. She was loyal, silent, invisible. Until the emperor ordered her father executed for treason he never committed. From that day, every time she poured his wine, She imagined the crimson liquid as blood. Years later, on the anniversary of her father's death, she filled the emperor's chalice with a potion brewed from nightshade and betrayal. Cassian raised the cup high before his court, toasting eternal rule. Moments later, he collapsed, his golden crown tumbling across the marble floor. Panic consumed the empire. Without Cassian, the generals turned on one another, and the kingdom burned. When they found Lyra, she was smiling through tears. "I didn't kill an emperor," she said. "I ended a curse." The empire never rose again. The chalice remains sealed in the royal vault, marked with 2 words engraved in gold: drink and remember. King Halwyn trusted his guards above all. They were his shield, his brothers, his final line between safety and death. But within those armored ranks stood one who served another master. The assassin was known only as the Whisper. He had trained for years, not to kill for gold, but for vengeance. His village had been burned by Halwyn's army during a forgotten war. Now, he wore the king's crest on his chest and carried death in his heart. 4 months, he waited, blending among loyal men. Then, one stormy evening, as Halwyn retired to his chambers, the Whisper struck, a single blade to the back, swift, silent, merciless. The king gasped, turning to face the man he had trusted with his life.
Why? He asked with dying breath.
The assassin bowed and replied, "Because you never remembered the names of the dead." He vanished into the night, leaving only the royal crown beside the corpse. Some say the Whisper was never caught, that he became a legend among the people, a ghost of justice. To this day, every king of Halwyn's line drinks before his guard with trembling hands, haunted by the thought, who among them wears the mask of loyalty? In the blazing summer of the year 1132, Queen Adriel's castle went up in flames, and with it, her legacy. But fire was not the beginning of her end. It began with love, and ended with betrayal. Her most trusted general, Sir Thane, had secretly plotted against her. He envied her throne, her command, and the loyalty she inspired. When the neighboring empire promised him power in exchange for her death, he agreed. He invited her to a victory celebration after defeating their enemies, and as she entered the grand hall, the doors sealed behind her. The tapestries caught flame, ignited by oil-soaked torches hidden in the rafters. Adriel fought through smoke and screams, realizing too late that the fire was no accident. She perished in the inferno, her crown melting beside her as Sir Thane fled with the foreign army, but his victory was brief. Within a year, every soldier under his command died of plague. And one night, Thane's castle burned from within, flames rising just as they had that fateful night. When rescuers sifted through the ashes, they found words carved into the wall beside his remains. Fire remembers its maker. Prince Aemon of Thaurik grew tired of bowing to his father's endless wars.
The old king believed blood and conquest were the pillars of power.
But Aemon dreamed of freedom, and of ruling without the shadow of his father's sword. So he turned to the unthinkable. In the dead of winter, he met with the enemy king across the frozen river, cloaked and trembling. They struck a deal. The prince would open the fortress gates in exchange for the throne once his father fell. When the attack came, the kingdom was unprepared. The royal army was slaughtered. The king, furious and heartbroken, cursed his son with his dying breath. "You'll rule nothing but ruin." Aemon took the throne, but the enemy never kept their promise. Instead, they returned within months, demanding half his kingdom. When he refused, they invaded again, this time burning everything he ruled. The prince fled to the mountains, alone, haunted by his father's words. Travelers still find ruins buried in snow, where a single frozen crown rests upon a throne of ice. A carving below it reads, "The son who betrayed his father betrayed himself." Princess Alara of Marinth was the last born of 7 royal children, invisible, underestimated, forgotten. Her brothers ruled the armies, her sisters married into power, and she was left with nothing but envy. When their father died, the crown was destined for her eldest brother, King Lorik. But Ilara wanted more than marriage or title. She wanted the throne itself. She began weaving her web, poisoning her siblings one by one under the guise of peace, feasts, and prayer. First, the youngest sister. A sickness of the heart, the healers said. Then, the second brother. A hunting accident. By the time suspicion arose, only Lorik and Alara remained. On the night of his coronation, she embraced him and slipped a ring upon his finger, the same ring she had coated in venom. He died that same hour, clutching his hand, his last words a whisper. "Why, Alara?"
She answered softly, "Because no one saw me." Her reign lasted mere weeks.
The people rose against her, burning her crown in the square.
They say her spirit still walks the castle halls, repeating the same line again and again. "Now you see me."
Duke Renard of Velis had always been the king's most trusted, noble, charming, loyal, and cunning. King Osric loved him as a brother and often said, "Renard's counsel is worth an army." But the duke's smile hid hunger. He wanted more than counsel. He wanted the crown. One winter evening, Renard invited the king to a private dinner to celebrate peace. The great hall glowed with candles. 100 dishes laid before them. They laughed, drank, and reminisced about their victories. When Osric lifted his goblet, he paused. "You're too generous, old friend," he said. Renard smiled. "It's my last gift to you!" Moments later, the king's laughter turned to choking gasps. Poison. Slow. Burning. Absolute. Renard stood and watched as Osric collapsed beside the table. The duke claimed the throne by dawn, declaring the king dead from illness. But the ghost of betrayal does not rest. Within a year, every servant from that dinner vanished, and Renard's food turned to ash in his mouth. One night, he was found slumped over his table, his lips blackened, a goblet beside him. Etched into its silver rim were words unseen before. "My last gift to you." The House of Dreven had ruled for generations. Brothers loyal, sisters united, cousins sworn to blood. But the thirst for the throne turned kin into killers. Prince Corlath, second son of the Lake King, believed his elder brother unworthy of the crown. "A ruler needs strength," he told his followers, "not mercy." So, under the cover of night, he stormed the royal keep. The battle between brothers raged through corridors once filled with laughter. Servants fled as swords clashed in the Hall of Ancestors. Corlath struck down his brother, claiming the crown from his still warm hands. Yet the people did not cheer. His mother cursed him before the court. "The blood on your hands will never wash away."
Years later, Corlath's own son led a rebellion, shouting the same words his father once had.
When the usurper turned king fell beneath his child's blade, the dynasty finally crumbled. They buried them all in one crypt. Father, son, and brother beneath a single stone carved with truth. The crown feeds only on family blood. Sometimes, a throne does not fall to armies, but to a single whisper. In the courts of King Darius, power balanced on fragile trust. His servant, a quiet man named Elric, was invisible, always present, never noticed. But Elric saw everything. Secrets, letters, lovers, meetings, conspiracies. When the rival queen of Narath offered him gold and freedom, he agreed to whisper one sentence into the right ear. During a grand feast, he leaned close to the queen and murmured, "Your husband plans to replace you with a younger bride." That night, the queen poisoned the king's wine. The royal guards, furious and confused, accused the nobles. Civil war
Erupted by dawn.
Elric escaped with his gold, but his whisper had destroyed an entire kingdom. Years later, he lived alone in the wilderness, tormented by the ghosts of those his words had killed.
On his deathbed, he confessed to a passing monk. "All I did was speak," the monk replied.
And that was enough to unmake a nation. They say Elric's ghost still murmurs in castle corridors, his whisper forever repeating. It began with a single word. Peace had lasted for 40 years between the realms of Aroth and Galdor, until one man Esgreed turned diplomacy into bloodshed. Lord Fendrel, the king's ambassador, was tasked with renewing the peace treaty. But gold and glory whispered louder than duty. Galdor's envoys offered him a private fortune if he forged the king's seal onto a false document, one that gave away Erath's when the deceit was discovered.
Both kings cried betrayal.
In a fury, Erath's king executed Galdor's messengers,
And Galdor declared war.
Lord Fendrel tried to flee, but the people found him hiding in a monastery. They dragged him through the streets, shouting, "Traitor!" before hanging him from the city gates. His final words were drowned by war drums. That single forged parchment burned thousands of towns, ended dynasties, and turned friends into enemies for a century.
The ashes of that war are long cold.
But the parchment remains in a museum, its royal seal blackened by smoke, bearing a single inscription beneath it, signed in greed, sealed in blood. King Theodoric believed himself chosen by God. He taxed the poor to build cathedrals and silenced priests who questioned his divine right. But faith has its limits, even for the faithful. Archbishop Corin, once the king's mentor, grew disgusted by the cruelty done in God's name. In secret, he gathered loyal clergy and plotted what he called a holy correction. During Easter Mass, as the king knelt to receive the blessing, Corin raised the chalice high, not with wine, but with blood. The king looked up in confusion just as the archbishop plunged a hidden blade through his throat. Gasps turned to screams. The altar ran red. Corin proclaimed, "Thus falls the false shepherd," before being cut down by the royal guard. The church denied all involvement, yet the cathedral doors were sealed for decades. When they were reopened generations later, the marble floor still bore faint crimson stains beneath the altar.
Pilgrims who kneel there claim to hear two voices whisper in the silence, one pleading,
One condemning, "Forgive me, Father. You were never my son." Queen Eleonora was renowned for her beauty and cold wisdom. Her marriage to King Roderick united two warring realms, but her heart belonged elsewhere. The captain of the royal guard, Sir Marius, had served her since youth, and their secret love grew in the shadows of the castle's stone halls. When Marius was accused of plotting against the crown, Roderick ordered his execution. The queen's heart shattered and hardened. That night, she made a pact with the rival king of Serith, her loyalty, her crown, and her land, in exchange for Marius's freedom. The rival king accepted, and his armies invaded under her secret signal. King Roderick was slain at dawn, betrayed not by soldiers, but by the woman sleeping beside him. Eleonora expected love to save her, but Marius could not forgive her treachery. "You killed your king for me?" he whispered. "How long before you kill me too?" He left her weeping on the throne she'd stolen, while the kingdom burned. Her name was struck from every record, known forever only as the queen who betrayed for love.
Sir Halric of Orwain was a war hero, or so everyone thought.
He led his men to victory after victory, hailed by songs and cheers.
But pride breeds envy.
And Halric envied his own king, who claimed all the glory.
When the king ordered him to lead one last campaign, Halric devised a plan that would make him ruler instead.
He replaced the army's wine rations with a deadly tincture slow, tasteless, merciless. On the eve of battle, his men drank and celebrated, unaware that death flowed in every cup. By morning, 10,000 soldiers lay still across the plains. The enemy never raised a sword.
Halric returned alone, claiming ambush and divine punishment.
But truth has a way of surfacing. A surviving squire confessed everything before dying of the same poison. Halric was dragged to the gallows, where the king himself placed the noose around his neck. "May your pride choke you as your men choked on your lies," he said. They say the wind still howls through the Orwain fields, a ghostly chorus of soldiers crying, "Drink to victory, Halric!" In the crumbling realm of Verith, power was like smoke. Whoever grasped it, lost it. But Lady Asandra knew how to hold it. She was cunning, patient, and mercilessly clever. The king trusted her as his advisor, calling her the mind of my throne. Yet while he dreamed of peace, Asandra dreamed of control. One by one, she turned his nobles against him, whispering lies in their ears that the king was losing his sanity, that he plotted against them all. Within a year, the court was divided. The king was cornered by his own council and declared unfit to rule. Isandra, for the safety of the realm, became regent. Months later, the king died mysteriously in his sleep. Her bloodline ruled for 2 centuries, each monarch carrying her symbol, a silver serpent biting its own tail. In the royal tomb, her epitaph reads, "The crown was never stolen. It was earned in silence." Lord Cassian was infamous for his deceit. He had betrayed every ally he ever had, trading loyalty for power, honor for gold. His motto was simple: trust no one, not even yourself. When his final plot succeeded, overthrowing the Duke of Ilrose, Cassian believed he was untouchable. But betrayal, like a shadow, always finds its master. The new allies he'd bribed with promises soon turned on him. One night, as he celebrated his victory, they arrived bearing gifts: a feast, a toast, and poisoned wine. Cassian laughed as he realized the truth. "Well played," he said, raising his cup. "You learned from the best." He drank deeply, dying with a smirk on his lips. The conspirators buried him beneath his own banquet hall. And carved above the tomb, "Here lies the man who trusted his own lies." To this day, locals say his ghost appears at feasts, pouring wine for guests and whispering, "Drink. It's only betrayal." Prince Alaric of Mornvale was adored by all. Brave, kind, destined to be the greatest king of his age. Songs of his valor filled every tavern. But legends have no room for weakness, and Alaric's greatest fear was that he'd never live up to his name. When his father fell ill, Alaric's uncle began to guide the kingdom. The people whispered that the old man's wisdom outshone the prince's courage. Jealousy twisted Alaric's heart. One night, he confronted his uncle, blade in hand. "The throne is mine," he hissed. He struck the man down. But witnesses saw his legend shattered overnight. The people who once sang his praises now spat at his name. Alaric ascended the throne, but no crown could silence his guilt. He ordered every bard who had ever sung of him to be executed. Every statue melted, every song erased. When he died, no one remembered his deeds, only his crime. The bards wrote a final verse in secret. He killed his uncle to rule a kingdom and murdered his own name to keep it.